I ended the relationship with my boyfriend because I got back with my daughter's father. Now she hates me and wants to go live with him. Doesn't she see I'm doing it for her? For the last 3 years, I have been living a lie that the world would call perfect, but I knew in my soul was a spiritual compromise. Mark, my boyfriend, is what people call a good man, the kind of person who shows up on time, fixes the sink, and treats my daughter Lily with a gentleness that most would find admirable. We built a life that looked stable from the outside, filled with weekend trips, shared meals, and a quiet domesticity that felt like a safe harbor. Yet, every time I saw Mark sitting on the sofa with Lily, helping her with her homework or laughing at a joke, I felt a heavy, cold stone in the pit of my stomach. It wasn't that he was doing anything wrong, it was the fact that he was occupying a space that didn't belong to him by divine right. He was a placeholder, a high-quality substitute for the biological reality that I had allowed to crumble years ago. I realized that by keeping Mark in our lives, I was essentially teaching Lily that the natural order of a family is negotiable, and that blood can be replaced by mere consistency. Every hug she gave him felt like a tiny betrayal of the man who actually gave her life. And I began to feel a profound moral obligation to correct his cosmic error. A mother's primary duty isn't just to provide comfort, but to ensure her child is rooted in their true heritage, no matter how difficult that truth might be. I couldn't keep living in this fabricated bubble of happiness while knowing that the foundation was built on the absence of her real father. I started to distance myself from Mark not because I stopped caring for his utility, but because I had to prepare myself for the monumental task of restoring the family altar. When Jason, my daughter's father, finally reached out to me after all this time, I didn't see it as a coincidence. I saw it as a sign from the universe that my prayers for restoration were being answered. He sent me a message saying he missed the unit we once were, and those words resonated through me like a bell tolling in a silent cathedral. It wasn't about romance or the messy history we shared. It was about the unit, the sacred triad of mother, father, and child that I had allowed to be broken. I knew immediately that I would have to make a sacrifice that most women would be too weak to handle, because I have always been the one to carry the moral weight of this family. I didn't hesitate to reply because a mother who truly loves her child will walk through fire to give that child her identity back. Breaking up with Mark was one of the most agonizing experiences of my life, but I did it with the stoic resolve of a martyr going to the stake. He cried, of course, and asked what he had done wrong, but how do you explain to a person that their only flaw is not being the original piece of the puzzle? I had to be the villain in his story so that I could be the hero in Lily's, a burden I accepted with a heavy but righteous heart. I told him that our 3 years were a beautiful chapter, but that the book of our lives required a different ending for the sake of my daughter's soul. He left that same afternoon, and as I watched his car pull away, I felt a strange sense of lightness, as if a spiritual debt was finally being paid. I spent the rest of the evening performing a ritual of restoration to prepare the house for the return of its rightful head. I took down every photograph of our trips with Mark, the beach days, the birthdays, the false memories, and placed them in a box in the garage where they belonged. In their place, I brought out the old, dusty framed portrait of Jason, Lily, and me from when she was a toddler and placed it in the center of the living room. Seeing that photo back on the wall felt like a physical realignment of the house's energy, a return to the natural law of the universe. I stood there for a long time, admiring the true version of us, knowing that I was finally doing the right thing for my daughter's future. When Lily came home from school and saw the house stripped of Mark's presence, I expected a moment of shared realization, perhaps even a tearful thank you for my bravery. Instead, the girl I have sacrificed everything for turned into a person I didn't recognize, screaming at me with a vitriol that was clearly born of confusion and a lack of spiritual maturity. She called me insane and delusional, her voice cracking as she looked at the portrait of a father she barely remembers with a look of pure disgust. It was a shocking display of ingratitude, but I remained calm, knowing that the truth often causes pain before it heals. She didn't see the cross I was carrying. She only saw the immediate discomfort of losing her buddy, Mark. She locked herself in her room and refused to come out for dinner despite my attempts to explain the higher purpose behind my decision. I sat at the table alone, staring at the 3 place settings I had laid out, feeling the familiar weight of the misunderstood martyr. It's a lonely path, being the only one in a family who values the sanctity of the blood bond over the convenience of a nice lifestyle. I know she thinks I'm the enemy right now, but that is the price a mother pays for being the gatekeeper of her child's heritage. She is a child, and children are often blinded by their immediate desires, unable to see the long-term spiritual benefits of a restored home. I spent the night listening to her muffled sobs through the door, and while it broke my heart, I didn't waver for a single second. If I had to endure her hatred for a year to give her a lifetime of being a whole child, then that is a bargain I will make every single time. People like Mark are easy to find, but a biological father is a singular, irreplaceable entity that defines a person's place in the world. I am willing to be the target of her misplaced anger because I know that, in the end, she will look back and realize I saved her from a life of substitutions. My conscience is clear, even if my house is currently filled with the sounds of a teenager's temporary rebellion. I believe that once Jason moves back in and the rhythm of the original family takes hold, Lily will realize that Mark was just a temporary bridge. She will see the strength it took for me to dismantle a comfortable life to pursue a righteous one, and she will finally respect me as a mother who doesn't take the easy way out. Until then, I will continue to bear this silence and this hostility as my personal penance for having strayed from the path for 3 years. I have restored the natural order, and the universe will eventually reward that alignment, regardless of how messy it feels in the moment. I am the architect of her destiny, and architects often have to tear down a faulty structure before they can build a cathedral. Main story comments. Anonymous user 1 says, "So you threw away a stable, loving man who raised your kid for 3 years for a ghost who couldn't even stay around in the first place? This isn't sacred. It's self-sabotage." Ops reply, "A mother's duty isn't to what works or what is convenient, but to what is right by blood and the spiritual order of the family." Anonymous user 2 says, "You're completely ignoring Lily's feelings. She just lost the only father figure she actually knows. You're not a martyr, you're just being selfish." Ops reply, "She's a child. She doesn't know what's good for her soul yet, but she will thank me at her wedding when her real father is the one walking her down the aisle." Update 1. It's been 3 days since my last update, and the process of healing our family has officially begun, though it hasn't been without its trials. Jason moved his things into the guest room this morning, a decision I made to keep our environment pure and focused on the emotional reunification before we worry about the physical. I wanted him to feel the weight of his return, to understand that this is a sacred mission, not just a casual move-in. He looked a bit overwhelmed by the gravity of the situation, but I reassured him that we were simply reclaiming what the years had stolen from us. I had prepared a beautiful speech for Lily to welcome him, but she refused to even open her door when he arrived. Jason looked so incredibly hurt when she wouldn't come out, and seeing that pain in a father's eyes broke my heart into 1,000 pieces. It is a tragedy when a child is so brainwashed by the niceness of a stranger like Mark that they can't recognize the soul-deep connection they have with their own flesh and blood. I spent the rest of the morning comforting Jason, telling him that Lily is simply going through a phase of resistance that all great restorations face. He's a sensitive soul, and I can tell he feels the burden of his past absence, which is why I'm working double time to make this transition seamless. I am essentially the bridge between them, and I will not let that bridge collapse under the weight of a teenager's stubbornness. I spent the entire afternoon in the kitchen, carefully recreating Jason's favorite meal from the early days of our relationship, a specific slow-roasted beef that we used to share when Lily was a baby. I wanted the house to smell like the past, to trigger those deep-seated memories that I know are buried somewhere in Lily's subconscious. I even set the table with the good china, creating an atmosphere of celebration to mark the return of the king to his castle. Every detail was curated to evoke the unit we once were, a visual and sensory reminder that we are a whole family again. I felt like a high priestess preparing a sacred feast, a duty I performed with a sense of quiet, somber pride. Lily finally emerged from her room around 6 o'clock, but only because she was hungry, and the look of cold indifference on her face was a direct insult to the effort I had put in. She didn't even acknowledge Jason sitting at the table. She just walked straight to the fruit bowl and grabbed an apple as if he were a piece of furniture. When I suggested she sit down and join us for a family communion, she looked me dead in the eye and called me pathetic for bringing a stranger back into our home. It's a sharp, cruel word that showed just how much Mark's influence had poisoned her ability to perceive the truth. I didn't snap back, because a martyr must remain composed in the face of persecution. I simply took a deep breath and looked at her with all the maternal pity I could muster, letting her words wash over me without leaving a mark. I told her, quite calmly, that one day she will understand the immense sacrifices a mother makes to keep a family whole, and that her current rebellion is a small price for me to pay. Jason tried to say something, a gentle, "Hey Lil," but she just ignored him and went back into her room, slamming the door so hard the framed portrait in the hallway rattled. It was a display of pure, unadulterated disrespect, but I just smiled at Jason and told him to keep eating. We are in the cleansing phase of this journey, and I expected some toxins to be released. The rest of the evening was quiet, with Jason and I speaking in hushed tones about the future and how we would slowly win her back. I could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes, but I am the anchor of this family, and I will not allow him to drift away again just because a 16-year-old is throwing a tantrum. I am providing him with the stability he needs to step back into his role, and I am providing Lily with her roots, whether she wants them or not. Roots can be incredibly painful when they are growing back into dry soil, but they're necessary for the tree to survive. I went to bed feeling exhausted but morally superior, knowing that I am the only one doing the hard work of family preservation. Update 1 comments. Anonymous user 1 says, "You call him a stranger in quotes, but Lily is right. If he's been gone for years, he is a stranger to her. You can't force a bond that doesn't exist." Ops reply, "Time is irrelevant when it comes to the sacred bond of the original family. The blood knows its own, even if the mind is temporarily confused." Anonymous user 2 says, "Cooking a favorite meal doesn't fix years of absence. You're forcing your daughter into a horror movie scenario where a man she doesn't know is living in her space." Oopsie reply, "I am providing her with her roots. Roots can be painful when they grow, but they are the only thing that will keep her grounded in the long run." Update 2. It's been 2 weeks since my last update, and the house has settled into a heavy, stagnant rhythm that I am desperately trying to infuse with family spirit. Things are challenging, to put it mildly, mostly because Jason is still finding his footing and hasn't secured employment yet. He spends most of the day on the couch, which I recognize is a form of emotional recovery after the trauma of being separated from us for so long. I don't mind supporting him financially for now, as I see it as an investment in the moral architecture of our home. His presence alone is a blessing, a masculine energy that has been missing, even if that energy currently involves a lot of daytime television and silence. To help us bond, I started a family gratitude journal and placed it prominently on the dining table, requiring everyone to write one thing they're thankful for about their father each day. I thought this would be a beautiful way to force Lily to see the positive aspects of Jason's return, and to practice the humility she so clearly lacks. I spent my mornings writing long, poetic entries about Jason's quiet strength and biological legacy, hoping to lead by example. I am the spiritual guide of this household, and I believe that if I manifest enough gratitude, the rest of the family will eventually follow suit. It is a grueling task to be the only one striving for light in such a dark, resistant atmosphere. Yesterday, I went to check the journal, expecting to see some small sign of progress from Lily. But what I found was a deliberate act of emotional terrorism. She had written, in bold, aggressive letters, "I'm thankful. Mark still answers my texts when I'm crying." I was absolutely livid, my hands shaking as I read the words that felt like a slap to the face of our entire restoration project. It was a betrayal of the highest order, a calculated move to undermine the work I am doing to fix this family. She was reaching out to the placeholder while the original was sitting right there in the living room, waiting for her love. I confronted her immediately, and I didn't hold back, because sometimes the truth needs to be delivered with the force of a hammer. I told her that communicating with Mark is a direct betrayal of the sacred work we're doing here, and that she was being incredibly cruel to her real father. I reminded her that Jason chose to come back to a daughter who treats him like absolute dirt, and that she should be grateful he didn't just turn around and leave again. She looked at me with such coldness, a look that said she didn't value the blood I keep talking about, and it made me realize how far gone she really is. She's addicted to the easy, shallow comfort that Mark provided, and she hates me for making her face the real world. I suggested to her that her loyalty to Mark is actually a form of spiritual weakness, a refusal to accept the natural order because it requires effort and sacrifice. She just laughed a hollow, mocking sound and told me that Jason is just a guy on our couch, which made me want to scream at her lack of perception. I explained that Jason's current lack of a job is a worldly concern, whereas his status as her father is a spiritual reality that transcends money or status. She doesn't understand that the head of the house is a title given by God and nature, not by a paycheck or a career. I am fighting a war for her soul and she is fighting me with the weapons of a spoiled child who misses her old toys. I have now forbidden her from contacting Mark, a rule that I know is necessary for her cleansing, even if she sees it as tyranny. I had to take her phone away for a few hours to drive the point home, a sacrifice of my own peace that I was willing to make for her ultimate benefit. Jason just sat there during the entire argument, looking at the floor, which I interpreted as him giving me the space to handle the maternal discipline side of things. I am carrying the weight for both of them, acting as the enforcer and the nurturer all at once. It is an exhausting, thankless role, but someone has to have the moral courage to burn the bridges to the past so we can't retreat. Update 2 comments. Anonymous user 1 says, "So Jason is a jobless couch potato and you're forcing your daughter to write thank you notes to him? You're not a martyr, you're a delusional enabler." Ope's reply, "A is recovering his place as the head of the house. Financial status is worldly and temporary, but the family bond is spiritual and eternal." Anonymous user 2 says, "You're taking her phone because she's talking to the only person who actually cares about her feelings. You are systematically destroying your daughter's mental health." Ope's reply, "Mark was a temporary bridge that served its purpose. The bridge must be burned once you reach the other side to prevent any backward movement." Update 3. It's been 1 month since my last update, and the tension in this house has reached a point where the air feels like it's vibrating with unspoken resentment. The restoration is proving to be a much heavier cross than I anticipated, largely because I am the only one actually trying to carry it. Last week was Lily's 16th birthday, a milestone that should have been the crowning moment of our new family life, a celebration of her complete home. I had planned everything to be perfect: the cake, the decorations, and a special moment where Jason would give her a father's blessing. But in a moment of human frailty, Jason completely forgot about the dinner and didn't come home until late that night. I could see the look of triumph in Lily's eyes as the hours ticked by and her real father remained absent, a look that said she had been right all along. I refused to let her have that victory, so I lied for him, weaving a complex story about how he was out scouting for opportunities for our future and had gotten caught up in an important meeting. I painted him as a man working tirelessly behind the scenes to provide for us, a silent hero who just happened to lose track of time. It was an exhausting performance and I felt the weight of the mother's lie pressing down on me. But I did it to protect the image of the family unit. I am the guardian of the myth, and I will not let it shatter just because of a lapse in memory. Lily didn't believe a word of it, of course. She sat there picking at her cake with a localized coldness that seemed to drop the temperature of the room by 10 degrees. When Jason finally stumbled in, looking disheveled and offering a weak excuse about his phone dying, the mask I had created for him began to slip. Lily looked me straight in the eye, not with anger but with a terrifying kind of pity, and told me that I wasn't doing this for her at all. She said, "You didn't do this for me, Mom. You did this because you're obsessed with a photo that was a lie even back then." It was the most disrespectful, arrogant thing she has ever said, a direct attack on my moral integrity. I didn't even think, I just reacted, my hand moving of its own accord to deliver a sharp slap across her cheek. It wasn't an act of anger or abuse as the modern world would label it, but a desperate attempt to wake her up from her own blinding disrespect. I felt like a priestess performing an exorcism, trying to drive out the spirit of arrogance and Mark-induced entitlement that had taken over her personality. The silence that followed was deafening, a vacuum that sucked the remaining air out of the room. Lily didn't cry. She just touched her face, looked at me as if I were a monster, and walked out of the kitchen without saying another word. Jason, instead of backing me up or thanking me for defending his honor, just stood there looking horrified, which was a bitter pill for me to swallow. I realized in that moment that I am truly alone in this fight. I am the only one with the stomach for the hard parts of restoration. I spent the night in the guest room, weeping not for myself but for the sheer difficulty of saving people who don't want to be saved. I am the architect, the builder, and the enforcer, and I am exhausted by the constant need to justify my love through discipline. Lily has spent the last few days in total silence, a cold war that I am determined to win for her own good. This morning she dropped the ultimate bomb. She told me she has already called Mark and that he's coming to pick her up to talk to a lawyer about her living with him. She had the audacity to say that Mark is the only real parent she has left. A statement so biologically and spiritually false that it made my blood run cold. She's willing to throw away her original family for a man who has no claim to her, all because she can't handle the discipline of a real mother. I am now facing the possibility of losing the very person I did. All of this for a cruel irony that only a true martyr could understand. I am standing in the wreckage of my best intentions, still convinced that I am the only one who is right. Update 3 comments. Anonymous user 1 says, "You slapped a 16-year-old on her birthday because she told you the truth? You didn't wake her up, you just ensured she'll never speak to you again." Ops reply, "A mother corrects because she loves I'm saving her from her own arrogance and the lie that she can choose her own reality over biological truth." Anonymous user 2 says, "Lily is choosing the fake father because the fake father didn't hit her and actually showed up for 3 years. You've lost her, Sarah." Ops reply, "She's being manipulated by Mark's niceness, which is just a mask for his lack of biological claim. She is choosing comfort over the sacred." Update 4. It's been 2 months since my last update, and the silence in this house is now a permanent resident. My house is whole in a technical sense. The portrait is still on the wall, and the original furniture is in place. Yet it has never felt more hollow or abandoned. The legal system, which is supposed to protect the integrity of the family, instead became a weapon for Lily to use against the natural order of things. She managed to convince a family court mediator that her environment here was unstable and toxic. Can you believe the sheer irony of that word? My sacrifice, my moral clarity, and my tireless work to restore her heritage were labeled by a stranger in a suit as instability. I sat in that mediation room and listened to my daughter describe our home as a place of fear, completely ignoring the thousands of hours I spent trying to build a cathedral for her soul. She looked at Mark, who had the nerve to show up and sit on her side of the table with more affection than she has ever shown me. It was a public humiliation, a crucifixion of my motherhood at the hands of the very person I was trying to save. The court eventually granted her wish to move out and live with Mark, effectively declaring that feelings and consistency are more important than the sacred bond of blood. She moved the rest of her things out 3 days ago, leaving her room a cold, empty shell that mocks my every effort. The cruelest part of this entire tragedy, however, wasn't Lily's departure but the cowardice of the man I did it all for. Once Lily was gone and the audience for his fatherhood disappeared, Jason's resolve vanished like smoke in the wind. He realized that without his daughter's approval he couldn't bear the weight of being a father in this house. He didn't see that his duty was to stay and fight with me. He only saw his own discomfort and the fact that I was no longer a fun partner but a grieving mother. He packed his bags last night and left, saying some nonsense about needing to find himself again, as if himself wasn't supposed to be right here at the head of the table. So here I am, sitting in the ruins of a life that I dismantled with my own 2 hands for a higher purpose that no one else was willing to see. I destroyed a 3-year relationship with a man who loved me, and I lost my only daughter, all to restore a family that apparently only existed in my head and in that stupid, faded portrait on the wall. I'm the only one left in this house, surrounded by the ghosts of what I thought was right, while the world continues to reward the substitutes. People will call me a failure, they will call me toxic, and they will mock the ruins I'm sitting in, but they don't understand the depth of my conviction. I did everything right by the laws of the spirit and the laws of a mother's duty, and if the world is too broken to accommodate that truth, then that is the world's failing, not mine. I followed the moral path to its very end, and even if that path led to a cliff, I can say I never wavered or took the easy way out. I am a martyr for a cause that was too pure for the people involved to handle, a woman who valued the sacred in a world that only cares for the comfortable. I will leave the portrait on the wall, even if I am the only one left to look at it, as a testament to the family that should have been. I am alone, but I am right, and in the end, that is the only comfort a person like me truly needs.